Genesee County, a developer wants to bring thousands of new homes to a mainly rural area. This proposal is drawing criticism from some because of its proximity to a set of local racetracks.
Horse Pass Motorsports Park is a racing complex in Chandler that opened in 1983 and spans over 440 acres.
However, as Cronkite sports reporter Michael Garaffa tells us, the legendary spot will be shutting down in 2023.
One of only 2 places in Arizona where drivers can legally race cars is set to close.
How can you complain about onions if you order them on a steak?
So good and tasty.
Right? How can residents complain about noise when they live next to a racetrack? Shocking! Shocking that there would be noise next to a racetrack, but for some reason this continues to happen. And they win. I don't know why do idiots always win? This seems to have happened and almost happened when the news hit Cleetus McFarland's Freedom Factory, right? It stood up. He had to stand up, he had to speak against people wanting to further build residential properties right next to a track that was formerly known as DeSoto Speedway. So why are people idiots? Like, why would they move next to a track and complain about the track? And does this actually mean for the end of all racetracks? Because this is just the first time I would say that there's been a large outcry, but it's happened almost everywhere for the last like 30 years. And most of them, they do seem to be dying off. I'm AlexMartini with 2 underscores on Instagram, and today we're talking about cars, more specifically, if racetracks are a dying business. Now, racetracks have had zero love. Outside of actual drag strips that have NHRA sponsorship dollars behind them or they're a part of the NHRA circuit, racetracks have always seemed to be like the adopted child of stadiums for cities. Like, remember, there are actual communities that have to get charged sales tax or stadium tax so that the stadiums can get enough money to keep having the sports ball games. But when it comes to small businesses with racetracks, they usually get approximately zero of that sort of tax credit. And it's been that way for a while. Now sure, this is gonna have some generic statements in it, but bear with me here, because tracks were almost exclusively built out of necessity, because when you go all the way back into the beginning of time, racing initially began out of the southwest Los Angeles area here in the United States. People would take whatever had 4 wheels out them, they'd take them out in the desert where nobody was around, they'd rip off the fenders, the mirror, glass, and more, literally anything that added weight, and they'd go run quarter-mile drag strips against anyone that wanted to give it a shot. This is a real story. This is what they used to do. And it was righteously dangerous and not really a good idea because it wasn't sanctioned by anybody. There was no government body. There's nobody trying to figure out how to do it safely. It was just, men being men. Maybe women too, I would assume, because it was like 1920. Anyway, because of the crashes, deaths, and overall lack of oversight, it almost got shut down. The actual state of Nevada and California were gonna shut this entire thing down. And it wasn't until Bill France Sr. managed to successfully wrangle the group of moonshiners turned racers into an organized activity, which you know as NASCAR. But by then, the hobby of driving at unnecessarily high speeds had already began to spread across the country, because just like everything else in life, the cool things on the western and the eastern coast just saturate the Midwest where we live, and we get all the cool last. Like V-necks, those just got out of style. And these regional guys and gals that love to race would often either buy or already owned plots of land that they had turned into tracks, because you had seen a lot of people get excited about this sport, this American dream of having a car that you could drive around, a sports car that you could race. Now, for instance, and I want to make sure that I'm like putting this back on fact, the first professional racetrack was built by Hugh Fratuske Lock King or something like that. He was a British entrepreneur that got his land from inheritance, rich boy, all right, and then turned it into the Brooklands back in 1907 in Surrey because he could. Lots of awards were won there, but nevertheless, this was back in 1907. As a lot of laws came into this, the need to having racetracks grew and grew and grew. And in the States, these farmlands, they turned into drag strips because they were easy. They turned into oval tracks, mud tracks, everything in between. And the most famous names like Holly, Edelbrock, Richter, and more were getting money from businesses which continued to grow the sport. And for the most part, things were actually looking up. You had this spread of tracks go across the United States, and you had money going into these tracks because you had NASCAR, you had the NHRA, you had things like that. And you had these tracks littered throughout that were like 30 minutes out from the city and were typically managed by the family that owned the land. And things were perfect. Everybody was happy. But then people had offspring. I'm not sure why, but they did. A lot of them, okay? And I love family. Call me Vin Diesel with hair, but they need a space to live. And as cities began expanding, You already know where this story is going. Tracks got swarmed over time, and the development and condos and terribly built Menards homes that really shouldn't even be a thing started to litter these areas that used to have nothing but farms and maybe a drag strip. And initially, a lot of times people thought that this was a good thing. These like first generation drag strips were excited because more people equaled more attendance, which equaled more sales. And as the generation switched from the 40s to the 70s though, the interest in the same motorsports, like drag racing for instance, just weren't as large. And the fight to keep those tracks began to die, mostly because the people that owned them began to die. You have these people that are growing out all these homes and they need a place to live. And they go next to a racetrack, and I'm sure there's some sort of real estate agent that barely has half a brain saying that it's not that loud. So people buy the land and then they realize that, you know, drag cars are loud. Now, a lot of these tracks have like very valuable residential property. And if they're not being sold for actual residential properties, the neighbors will complain loud enough to get the track shut down to begin with, which means we probably will see racetracks die forever. But then something really cool happened, and something that I didn't think I would ever see before. Something that I think not a lot of people know about. Now, I can safely say that the days of like old drag strips and first generation tracks will probably die. And you'll see people in the Midwest like me get absolutely the shortest end of the stick with what's about to happen. But I'm still excited because I do think this will help keep the future of racetracks alive. I don't know what else to call it, like outside of saying that it's like Nevada wealth. Welcome to Nepo Car Enthusiast. Nepo Car Enthusiast. Massive performance school and motor resorts have taken the mantle for what I think will be the future of track development for people like you and people like me. For instance, Spring Mountain Motor Resort and Country Club is across the street from a lot of developed houses and things like that, and it's pressed up against the mountain. It's like an hour outside of Las Vegas. Now, this is a 50 configuration style 5-mile track just at the start of their development, with over 1,000 acres of further development dedicated to track design. It's purposely built to be 1 million different tracks in one area. The Ascari racetrack in Malaga is another example of tracks that turn resorts for like wealthy motorheads. So like rich people got together and like, what if we made it for rich people? And like somebody came along and was like, yeah, that'd be kind of sick. So you have things like the Mountaineer, Oaklawn, and even MSR Houston Motor Speedway Resort. These are places where now being a part of like a racetrack is not so much just going for a day, but it's a club, it's a community. So will racetracks die? And honestly, the old look of what a racetrack is will probably die. I love them, I love WIR, okay? But without additional entertainment, sponsorships, and big media covering the tracks with dollars and insurance, there's just no way small tracks around the country will stay put, even though I hate saying that. And I want Cleetus's Freedom Factor to stay alive, and I think because of his massive following, I think it will. I just don't know if that's gonna happen for everyone. And on the other side, we will still see tracks around, but probably just in a different way. You have these big, expensive tracks held as resorts, or you have these desert tracks that just aren't inhabitable for normal human beings to live next to, which is kind of great. So you either have to be rich or you got to be willing to go where nobody else can live. That's the cost of being a car enthusiast right now. Let me know your thoughts, or if you've ever been to one of those. I was actually at the Ron Fellows one when I was learning how to drive the Corvette C8, and that thing was wild. It was so cool. I was vastly out of my realm in terms of like what I was doing there, because I'm just a dude and everybody else had radicals and cool stuff like that. But I'm hoping somebody comes along and makes something like that that might be just a little bit more affordable, because I don't know if like a $600 a day ticket is really going to work for... Let me know your thoughts. I'm Alex, AlexMartini with 2 underscores on Instagram, and we will see you guys later. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. I'm slapping this table. We'll see you later. Adios.